All right. So we're going to look at this topic of what doctors don't know about disease. And again, like I said, I'm excited to find out what I'm going to learn tonight because I am a doctor. And there's probably things I don't know about disease. So here's a tree. And when you walk up to a tree, what's one of the first things you notice? Okay, leaves, fruit, roots, branches, okay, yeah, trunk, all right, bark, yeah. So you had cherry and plum and you were looking for the fruit? Yeah? Yeah, my favorite tree, my favorite cherry tree was in Portland because that's where Grandpa lived. And I got to climb his Bing cherry tree and pick cherries off of his tree. So I was actually born in Portland Adventist. And lived there until a ripe old age of 2. And then we moved over to Florida, and that's where I grew up. So, but I am an Oregonian by birth. Not for much of my much of my life. Anyways, so yes, it's good to be back home. So yes, I mean we notice the things that are above ground, the things that are obvious. Those are the things that catch our attention. If it's the season, then oftentimes it's the fruit, right, or the leaves, the shape of the tree, and so on. And so we're going to take, let's say that you've got a tree that has some bad fruit and bad leaves. That's kind of obvious, typically, right? Especially if you've got some big fruit, like jackfruit, or things of that nature. Of course, you don't grow that around here. And so the things that are very obvious are like symptoms, right? When you have pain, when you're coughing, when you're itching, when you've got sore throat, when you've got a runny nose, when you've got whatever, well, it's pretty obvious that you've got it. And what do we typically do for the symptoms that we have? Okay, so we're looking at treating the symptoms by taking something typically that's the opposite of that, right? Something that produces the opposite effect. That would be allopathic, right? As opposed to another system of treatment where you would give them the same thing that causes the same effect, which would be called homeopathic, right? So different, two different schools of thought. So yes, there's usually a pill for every ill, and whether that is going to the pharmacy to find a pill for every ill, or whether that's going to the vitamin store and finding a pill for every ill. You can go either way, and you can do the same thing, right? Whether it's from an herbal standpoint or from a more purified, concentrated standpoint. Now, let's say that you have pain in your back. It was right there between your shoulder blades. It started suddenly. It's very painful. It's excruciating. You can't lay on your back. It's difficult to move. It's hard to breathe. Oh, it's just very painful, and you don't have insurance, and so you don't want to go expend a lot of money in relation to this, and so you take a few, over-the-counter medications to try to help with the pain, and it really doesn't touch much at all. But you kind of survive through the day, but you know what happens at night? Yeah, the distractions are gone, pain levels seem to go up, and so on, and you can't lay on your back, it's just horrible, and so you decide you're going to go into the emergency department and get this taken care of. Well, unfortunately, shortly before you got there, a bus and another bus ran into each other, and there's all sorts of casualties. That emergency department is absolutely flooded, and they've got maybe a PA or a nurse practitioner out in the waiting room just triaging people, and they say, you got back pain? Here, prescription, go. You can get that filled. See your primary care doctor tomorrow. And so you go to the pharmacy and you get it filled and you take something a little bit more powerful. It's enough to kind of make you like, and maybe you drift off to sleep a few times and that wakes you up and you don't get much sleep. So you go to your primary care doctor tomorrow and your primary care doctor decides to do an important thing. to check your back. And guess what they find? There's a reason why you've got some back pain. You really shouldn't have said what you said yesterday to your spouse. And all of a sudden you had some back pain and you couldn't lay on your back and it was hard to breathe and it was hard to turn and it was really painful. And did those pills take care of the problem? No, because it doesn't address the problem. It only addresses the manifestation of the problem or the pain associated with it, right? Now, if you have a knife in your back, is it a good thing that you can feel pain? Yes. Yes. Because otherwise, if you couldn't feel pain, you wouldn't know anything's going on. I mean, that's the problem with leprosy. And with leprosy, you know, that infection starts affecting the nerves and and then you can't feel. And now you can be sleeping and the rat can be nibbling off the ends of your fingers, or you can be working at the fire, and you're stirring, and somebody calls your attention, and you're talking about whatever. You look back, and you just rested your hand on the side of the pot, and and you burned it down to the bone, or whatever. Pain is a good thing. Now, it's not good to be in pain, but it has a good function to let you know something's wrong, right? It's like the fire alarm there to let you know, hello, problem. So is the fire alarm a problem? No, it's part of the solution. What's the problem? The fire, right? The fire is the problem. So what happens if the fire is going, the fire alarm is going, the fire alarm woke you up and you can't sleep very well with it, and you get a pillow. And you put it over the fire alarm. So notice that, oh, it's not so bad, but your arms are getting tired. So you get some duct tape, and you tape it down, and you go back to bed. How's that going to work? Yeah. If you don't wake up in the morning, whose fault is that? Yeah, that's yours. Because you were ignoring the fire alarm, right? So, it's not a good idea. The fire alarm is there for a reason. It's there to let you know something's wrong so you can do something, not about the fire alarm, but so that you can do something about the fire, right? That's there. And of course, if you take care of the fire, then you might want to take care of the fire alarm too. And every once in a while, they have this annoying little issue where the battery gets low enough and then it starts chirping at you. That's a really loud chirp. And some of them, they don't allow you to take the battery out of them anymore. Have you found that? You get the fire, it's all encased and whatever, and you got to take the sledgehammer to the thing outside on the concrete, and then it'll stop chirping. Don't ask me why I know. Yeah. Now, the fruit and the leaves don't grow by themselves. They grow off of the branches, and the branches represent our behaviors. So when it comes to a degree, and I know that I'm generalizing things, and when you generalize things, you miss some stuff along the way. But in general, the typical healthcare system addresses symptoms, right? And so we need to get a little bit deeper than that. So now you can go to a lifestyle center that addresses behaviors. And so I'm kind of marching along my progression of, because I started in conventional medicine, I did ER. And then I did ER and family practice and urgent care and ICU and hospitalist. So I did a few things along the way. And then I ended up transitioning to lifestyle because I thought, you know what, I'm really not fixing much right now. ER, I didn't have a problem there because you usually don't see patients twice. And if you do, it's not good. Well, you got shot again? Oh. Maybe you should choose different friends to hang around with, and so on. But when it came to the family practice, well, it was different because you get to see somebody again and then again and then again, and have the same problem. And I things on a long-term basis in ER, because in ER you just got to figure out what's going on. You got to figure out fast, and you got to get some solutions. And then you get to pass them off to somebody else, and then they get to take care of them for the rest of the time, And so now I'm stuck in a family practice clinic, and I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, well, there's this medication schedule. You know, if they have this, they take this. If they have that, they take that. If they have that, they take that. Okay, well, I did that. And then they came back 6 months later, and they had the same problem, and they just needed more medication. And I was like, oh, okay. So let's increase the dose, and then let's have you come back. And they come back 6 months later, and they still have the same problem. Okay, well, let's add a second medication to this. And they come back 6 months later, and they have the same problem. And I'm like, this is a problem. Like, I'm not fixing anything because they continue to have the same problem despite giving them a treatment. And I wonder if it's a treatment if they continue to have the same problem. Then I started thinking, I wonder, well, diabetes is not the effect of a lack of metformin. Hypertension is not caused by a lack of lisinopril. High cholesterol is not caused by the lack of Crestor. Let's go. All right, there's got to be something else. So I got curious, and started, investigating. And then I realized, oh, well, you know what? It's important what you eat, and it's important what you breathe, and it's important what you drink, and it's important all of these different things. And so you have behaviors. And so I started switching more to a behavior focus, Instead of medicate, you educate. And what are you going to educate people on? Well, you need to do this and do that, and don't do that, and don't do the other thing, and don't do that with that, please, and so on and so forth. And so I got involved in behavioral modification at a lifestyle center. And is it important to change your behaviors? Yes, of course it is. Right? Is it wrong to treat your symptoms? No, it's not wrong to treat the symptoms. Is it wrong to change your behavior? No, it's not wrong to do that either. Those can be appropriate things, but does it fix the cause? Is it deep enough? Oh, okay. Now, do the branches grow from themselves? No, what do they grow from? I don't know what tree you've grown. You've been looking at branches growing off the roots. Okay, all right. So you got a trunk in there. Yes. All right, you thought you were going to the ultimate. Just wait. All right. Yeah, you skipped a step, right? So there's a trunk, and the trunk. What do you do about the trunk? Some countries you paint it white. Yeah. You paint it white. You tap it. Get something from it. What else do you do with the trunk? Cut it off. Right? That's pretty much it. There's not much you can do with the trunk. And the trunk represents our needs. Right? Why do you breathe? Just because it's a fun thing to do? Why do you eat? Why do you drink? Well, hello. You breathe because you need oxygen. You drink because you need water. You eat because you need food, right? The reason that you have the behaviors is so that you can supply the needs. Now, if you're hungry, who has to eat? If you're hungry and I eat, how much is that going to help you? No. And if you're thirsty and I take a big drink of water, I'm going to be thirsty. Does that fix your thirst? No? All right. And if you're suffocating, I hyperventilate, that's not going to help either of us. Right? Supply. You got to supply your own need. And if the oxygen stays even at your nose, what's going to happen to you? Yeah, you're going to suffocate. You'll die. You only live when you bring it in and it becomes a part of you. And if the water stays at your lips, what's going to happen? Yeah, right? You're going to die as well. The only way you can live is if you bring it in and it becomes a part of you, right? So everything you need comes from outside of you, and it must be brought inside of you in order for you. And it's your own action that brings it in. right? It's your own action that brings it in. Nobody else can eat and drink and breathe for you. I mean, there is mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, you know. And what's that? Yeah, that one's tough. I've been there. In the ER, I've done a lot of codes, and yeah, that's not the nice thing to be involved in, right? And in RT, you know about that as well. And it's interesting, tubing subagonized on the ground. You know, it's one thing intubating on the bed. It's another thing intubating on the floor. You know, when they went down between the bed and the wall and so on, and it's just So anyways, yes, you got to bring it in, and if you don't bring it in, you can't live. So every need you have comes from outside of you. You need it because of what you are. Right? If you were a plant, you wouldn't need oxygen. What would you need? Carbon dioxide. Right? And if you were a plant, your food would not be fruit. What would your food be? Soil. Right? Try eating soil and see if that does well for you. Yeah, no, but it's wonderful for plants. Right? So what you are determines what you need. Everything that you need comes from outside of you, and everything that you need must be brought inside of you in order for you to live and survive by that. Right? And what you need is not going to force its way in. So you need that oxygen. It's not going to blow into you. You've got to breathe. And you need water. It's not going to squirt down your throat. You got to drink it. And you need food, and it's not going to crawl down your throat, hopefully. Every once in a while it does. You know. Come on. You know what I'm talking about. You know. Or you're on the motorcycle and you're like, oh, that's you. Right? So, yes. So, don't ask me why I know these things. So you must eat. So everything first takes what it needs, and then everything gives away and ministers to others. Anybody here ever kept every bite of food that you ever ate? Well, if you did, how big would you be? The average human being eats about 6 elephants in their lifetime. Or at least that amount of food, you know. Yeah, so you'd be pretty big. What if you kept every swallow of liquid that you ever drank? And every breath of air that you ever breathed? How big would you be? Yeah, there'd be one of us in here. Tight. Maybe. Right? Yeah, no. You take, but you give. Right? And you take gases and you give gases. And you take liquids, and you give liquids. And you take solids and you give solids. Right? You take and you give. And that's how everything functions. Now, does the trunk grow from itself? No, it grows from the roots, all right? And the roots represent our beliefs. Right? This is where you get underground. You don't necessarily know what somebody believes just by looking at them. Right? You can get a few ideas, you know, based upon whether they have clothes on or not, and what kind of clothes that they have on, and so on and so forth. You know, but if you really want to know what somebody believes, you got to have a conversation. You got to dig, right? And seek to understand that. And what do beliefs have to do with any of this? Everything, right? Well, you might not know what somebody believes, but if you observe them long enough, you'll find out. Because what you believe will eventually manifest itself in how you behave, right? And how you behave. So, if you believe that you need Dr. Pepper, what will you do? You're going to drink Dr. Pepper. But do you need Dr. Pepper? Are you sure? You'll turn into the soda pop, yes. Right? So, no, you don't need it because humanity existed before Dr. Pepper existed. And so, no, you don't need it. What you need must exist before humanity existed. So welcome to the first 7 days of creation, right? And so those are the things that you need. If it wasn't in the first 7 days, you don't need it, right? Serious. right? So if you believe that you need something that you don't need, what are you going to do? You're going to get it. You're going to take it. You're going to put it in, and now you have something that you don't need. Now, it's true that Dr. Pepper has things that you need. What does Dr. Pepper have that you need? Water. It's got lots of water. What else does it have that you need? Sugar, right? It's got sugar. And it's got a few electrolytes and so on and so forth. Yeah, it has things that you need. And so if you have the option of Dr. Pepper or nothing, the Dr. Pepper, you're going to live longer than if you didn't have anything, right? Because it does have some things that you need. But it also has some things that you don't need, and so you take in the things that you don't need, and when you take in things that you don't need, how does that work with your fruit and your leaves? Yeah, you'll get sick. You'll have problems. You'll have symptoms. It'll come, right? So, can you change what you need? No, it's fixed. It's fixed. You can't change what you need. It's just there. It's like the fulcrum of the teeter-totter, right? The part that doesn't move, that's the needs. So the behaviors must supply what you need. But if you don't believe according to what you need, you are not going to behave according to what you need, and you're either going to supply too much, too little, or the wrong stuff. And then you end up with bad fruit and bad leaves, right? So what you believe is really important. So if I'm simply involved in helping individuals change their behavior, and you do this and don't do that and do that and don't do that and so on and so forth, well, that's a little bit better than just dealing with the symptoms, but you really got to get to an individual's beliefs. What do you believe about this? What do you believe about you? And so on, right? That's important. But if you have a tree that has bad fruit and bad leaves, what do you fix? How often have you done anything with the roots? Except for a plant that's in a pot and it's gotten root bound. Other than that, what do you do with the roots? Oh, okay. So you fertilize them, you water them, you give them nutrients and all that kind of stuff. Are you doing that to the roots, or are you doing that to the soil? Oh, okay. So when you have problems, you don't fix the tree. You fix the soil. And the soil represents our sources. And so your sources can have too little of what you need, too little water, right? You can have too much of what you need, too much water, like now. And it can have the wrong stuff. Oh, you mean this doesn't take diesel? I thought we were going to have supercharged cherries. No, that doesn't work, right? So if it's got too little, too much, or it's got the wrong stuff, it's just not going to work, right? And you must have a source that has what you need. You must have beliefs that match your needs. Then your behaviors will supply what you need from a source that has what you need, and then you'll end up with good fruit and good leaves. Right? That's important. Now you need oxygen, water, food. How many people need that? Everybody. Anybody need love? Oh yeah. How many people need love? All right, we got a few volunteers. Anybody question that one? No? Okay, no 14-year-old males in the room right now. I have asked audiences all around the world, I said, is there anybody here that does not need love? And I've gotten 2 answers of no. I mean, that doesn't need love. I had 2 yeses, right? That essentially said, no, I don't need love. Both of them were 14-year-old males. And of course, why did they say, I don't need love? Because attention is a part of love. And they just got attention, right? Which proved their need for love, right? Sure. All right, so you need oxygen so you breathe. You need water so you drink. You need food so you eat. You need love so you... Okay. Okay. All right. So you need oxygen so you breathe. You need water so you drink. You need food so you eat. You need love so you love. Okay, all right, yeah, okay. So that, all right, so you give. All right, yeah, that's the response I've heard everywhere I've gone. All right. You need oxygen, so you exhale. You give oxygen. Is that how it works? You need water, so you pee. Is that how it works? No? You need food, so you vomit. Is that how it works? No? That's not how it works. You need love, so you give love. Yeah. Are we confused, maybe?
If you don't give love to a baby, the baby will die.
Okay, if you don't give love to a baby, the baby will die. I don't disagree with that.
Bone marrow will dry up.
Okay, your bone marrow will dry up.
Even animals will respond to this.
Yes, even animals will respond to this. Yes, absolutely. You have to receive love. Yes, right? Can you give what you do not have? No. So if you give love first in order to get love, then who is the source of love? No. If you must give love first in order to get love, who's the source of love? You are. You are. And whose love are you giving? Your own.
But don't we get love from Father God?
Oh, okay. All right, so don't we get love from Father God? Who's the source of love? God. So do you get love from God by giving love to Him first? No. What does the Bible say? We love because He first loved us.
So love should be under sources.
God should be under sources. Yes. And love is what He provides. Right? So, do you get love by giving love? Or do you get love by taking love? Yes, and receiving is an okay word, but the reason that I say taking is because it's never a passive process. Breathing is not passive. It's not that the air blows into you. Eating is not passive. It's not like food falls into your stomach, right? And drinking is not a passive process. It's always an active process. So there must be an active process of taking the love. Is there anybody here that has ever felt less than 100% full of love? And my hand's up. Yeah. Ever less than 100% full? Yeah, sure. If it was God's responsibility to fill us with love, how well would He take His responsibility? He does all things perfect, all things well. How often does God do all things well? All the time. So if it was God's responsibility for us to be full of love, how full would we be? Completely full, 100%. How often? All the time. So if you have had even a moment in your life when you have had less than 100% of love, that one moment in your life is evidence it's not God's responsibility to fill you with love. It's yours to accept it. That's right. Exactly. It's your own accepting of it, but you can't accept what's not available. So who is it that has to make sure it's available? God. under all circumstances, under all situations, the love of God is available. But you and I can't be full of it unless we take it. So how do you take it? What's the taking? So let's say you were having a bad day, and you came home, and after the boss had chewed you out and fired you, you know, it was a bad day. And things are not looking so good. The dog had just died yesterday, and you're, you know, a few other things had gone wrong through the week, and it's just not so good. And you come home and you stop at the mailbox, or of course around here in Portland, let's see, they had the mail slot in the door. Anyways, where we're at, it's a mailbox. Whatever for you, you stop at the mail, and you notice that there's a letter, and it's handwritten, and it's from the right person. And so you open it, and you read it, and it says, "Dear," and it has your name there, and it says, "Oh, I've been thinking about you, can't get you off my mind, thinking about the last time that we spent together, and looking forward to when we can be together again," and so on, and all sorts of mushy stuff all in between there, and love, and they sign their name at the bottom, and XOXO, and a few hearts, and whatever. How do you feel? Oh, you feel loved. Yes. So you were feeling down and dejected and not so good and so on and so forth, and now you feel loved. How much love is in the paper? How much love is in the ink? How much love is in the envelope? Can you extract it and purify it and concentrate it? Oh man, if I could, I would be so rich. That would be, oh man, that would be the ideal thing. If I could get somebody and I can inject them with this chemical and all of a sudden they have love. Oh. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Yeah. Yeah. Not so much, but anyways. So where's the love? Oh, the love's in the idea. What's an idea? Oh, it comes from thinking, product of the mind. Okay, yes. Okay. You know what the letter contains? Information. It contains information. Now, information can be put in something that's physical. Information can be stored in something that's physical. Information can be transferred by something that's physical. But guess what? Information never originates in something that's physical. Right. So there was another person that had a mind. And that mind had a thought. And that thought was transmitted via neurons to muscles, connected to bones, attached to a pen or a pencil, and that was placed in paper, and so on and so forth, and that was sent to you, and you took that information and you extracted the information, and you understood the information to mean love. That person loves you. Now, if the letter was written by the used car salesman at the end of the road, would you be like, oh, yeah, not unless that was, you were in love with that individual, right? You know, that's a possibility. It's a possibility, right? You know, and so on. But no, it came from the right person. So if it came from the used car salesman, you wouldn't believe it. Right? It's just a ploy. It's just try to get you to come down and, you know, get a car and all that kind of stuff. So you must believe it. Right? So it is the extraction of information that means love, and you believe it. That is taking it in. Right? That's taking it in. So you need oxygen, so you breathe. You need water, so you drink. You need food, so you eat. You need love, so you think. It's a thought process, right? It's a process of thought. But there has to be an origin for the information that you're taking in. But the extracting of it and making it your own is a part of a thought process. Now, what if you believe people are the source of the love you need? What happened if you took the tree and you took its roots out of the soil and you put the roots in another tree? And you took the second tree and you took its roots out and you put it in a third tree. And you took the third tree's roots out and you put it in a fourth tree, and you kept doing that until all the trees have their roots in all the other trees. What's going to happen? They're all going to die. Because no tree can be the source for another tree. Because if you have the same needs, you cannot supply those needs. How many people have the same needs? Everybody. So how many people can be a source for another person? Nobody. Nobody. But if you think another person is a source of the love that you need, what are you going to do? You're going to plant your roots in them. Now, are you going to get what you need? Oh, boy. Ah, all right. You can only get what you need from God's Word. Yeah, that's His love letter. Exactly. Yes. Yes. It's His love letter. And you can only get it from the source. Now, other people can be a channel of that, and you can be a channel of that for other people. But so you can pass it along, just like the tree. If this tree had another tree planted in its branches and so on and so forth, but it was still plugged into the soil, could it be a channel to support the other tree? Yes. But once its roots are removed, can it do anything to support that tree? No. No. So people can serve as a channel, but they cannot be the source. Cannot be the source. Now, all things that function are governed by law, and all laws that govern function are unchangeable, and proper function is only maintained by remaining within the law, and dysfunction is a result of going outside of the law. And when it comes to law and function, there is a fundamental law of all nature. And that fundamental law, and that fundamental law of all nature has two components to it. Excuse me. The first component is that nothing exists or functions in nature from itself. Nothing exists or functions from itself. There's a requirement of power, materials, resources, and so on that must be brought from somewhere else and assembled in order for that thing to exist. Right? And for it to function, it must have continued power in order to be able to function and so on. But also the second part is that nothing exists or functions for itself. Meaning nothing is the end of that power, the material, and the resources. That all is taken, but it must be given. Right? So the fundamental law in very simple terms is take to give. Right? Take to give. Everything in nature takes in order to give. There is not a single exception to that, no matter if you get to subatomic particles or you get to galactic proportions. Thank you. Galaxies. Galactic proportions, right? It doesn't matter how big the thing is, doesn't matter how small the thing is, everything in creation, everything in nature takes in order to give. And from this, you get things like thermodynamics, which says that all energy necessary for a system must come from outside of that system. And from this, you get things like cause and effect, because the effect does not produce itself. The power, materials, and resources must come from outside in order for the effect to then be there and to manifest, right? So anytime you see an effect, there must be a cause, and anytime there's a cause, it must produce an effect, right? And all of this comes from the fundamental law of taking to give. And I call that the law of life. Right? And if you've ever read this little book called The Desire of Ages, you'll find it in the very first chapter. So, what about side effects? Do treatments have side effects? Why? I would posit to you that the reason that there are side effects is because we're using treatments that don't address the cause. And if the effect or the manifestation of the cause is there and we treat it and it goes away, but the cause remains, what has to happen? The cause must manifest itself another way. Right? Must manifest itself another way. So side effects are by law. They're by law, by the law of cause and effect. Because if you have a treatment that does not address the cause and the cause still remains, then it must produce another effect. Right? Or your treatment doesn't work. Right. All right, let me skip a bunch of slides because I'm going slow. So, with a little road analogy, on the road is health because you're staying inside the law. Hello, my name is phone. Yes, sorry. Don't you love it when that happens? I know. And then the person up front points it out, and then it's even more embarrassing. Sorry. I'm just, I do that. All right, so you have laws, the things that you need. You need oxygen, water, food, nutrients, and so on and so forth. But you don't need too little and you don't need too much. And too little and too much is defined by law. So there's laws that define when you have too little, and there's laws that can define when you have too much. And if you get outside of law, it becomes uncomfortable and you have dysfunction. And the farther you get away, the more discomfort there is and the more dysfunction that there is. Until you eventually get to no function. And that's called death, right? So, health is proper function, which is the effect of staying within the law, and disease is dysfunction, which is the effect of going outside of the law. And if you get off the road, well, I don't know, I didn't check around. No, you do. I ran over them once. Rumble strips. Yeah. Well, some places I go, they don't have rumble strips. And they're like, what are you talking about? But so rumble strips. You get off the side of the road and you hit the rumble strips. And I'm glad that there's rumble strips. I'm alive because of rumble strips. Because I fell asleep behind the wheel and I woke up 2 lanes later, going off the road, coming to an overpass with the concrete pylons. And the rumble strips woke me up. And that was after a trauma surgery rotation. And I was up for, 36 plus hours and so on. And yeah, so I'm glad for the rumble strips. But the rumble strips are not bad. They're good. It just, it's annoying when you run over them. So symptoms and disease are like the fire alarm and the rumble strips. They're good. They're good. Now you might be looking at me and going, what, disease is good? Yes. It's actually part of the solution to prevent you from going all the way till death. What would happen if you had no symptoms and you had no disease and you're going off the road and you're going off the road and you're going off the road and all of a sudden, dead? And you didn't even know you were going there. Like, oh, that's so unfair. No, there's warning signs along the way. A lot of them, right? And they're good to have the warning signs to let you know something's wrong. So the law of cause and effect says that every effect must have a cause, and every cause must produce an effect. And if the effect is present, the cause is also present. And if the cause is removed, then the effect must go away. And that's because no effect can produce itself, because it's dependent upon power and materials and resources outside of itself in order to exist or function, right? And that's important for us to, to recognize, to understand. So that means that you will never find an effect without a cause. Ever. Right? What is it when you have an effect without a cause? What word do we give to that? Psychosomatic, okay. What's that? Miracle? Okay. All right. There's a more common term that we use for it. It's called chance. Chance is the idea of having an effect without a cause. Without a cause. And according to the law of cause and effect, there is no such thing as chance. It doesn't exist. It's only a figment of our imagination. And in fact, there is nothing that is truly random. Random is simply our inability to predict what's coming next. You know, like a computer that generates random numbers and so on. Could God predict what's coming next? Well, yeah, sure. He knows. There's nothing random for him. Right? It's just a reflection of our incapacity to understand. But the Bible tells us the curse causeless shall not come. And we also have some other passages that say in the laws of God in nature, effect follows cause with unerring certainty. Oh, what? When you talk about unerring, who are you talking about? You're talking about God. So the will of God establishes a connection between cause and its effects. So who's responsible for the effects? God. Guess what he's not responsible for? The cause. Not responsible for the cause. But he is responsible for the effects. And the effects are perfect. The effects are never wrong. Because if the cause is bad, the effect is going to be bad. And if the cause is good, the effect is going to be good. And God doesn't deviate from that. Right? Now, what is it called to break the law? Well, it depends on what law you're talking about, but yes, sin. All right. And when we talk about sin, what law is broken? God's law. And what's the foundation of God's law? His character, which is love, right? So, disease is the result of a love problem. Right? And just follow that. Disease is a result of a love problem. Right? What's that? Yeah, if you love me, keep my commandments. Right. Okay, I know. There is a divinely appointed connection between sin and disease. No physician can practice for a month without seeing this illustrated. If he will be observing and honest, he cannot help acknowledging that sin and disease bear to each other the relationship of what? Cause and effect. Right? It's there. It's there. Now, we get uncomfortable because usually when we talk about sin, now the next thing we talk about is blame. Right? So now you hear this and you're like, okay, here comes the hammer. Anybody here born with sinful nature? Okay. Anybody here ask for that? No? Really? I mean, you didn't before you were conceived, somehow petition that you might get a few drops of sinful nature in the process of your conception and so on? No? No? Really? You didn't ask for it. Did you ask for your hair color? No? Did you ask for your gender? No? Did you ask for anything that you were born with? No. Are you guilty for any way that you were born? No. No, of course not. And how many of us were born with sinful nature? All of us. Right? And what does sinful nature do? It sins. Right? It sins. If somebody was born a slave, is there blame for that? No. If they grow up a slave, is there a blame for that? No. If they become an adult and they're still a slave, are they to blame for that? No. And if they act as a slave while they're a slave, is there blame for that? No. But is it a problem to be a slave? Yes. And should it be fixed? Yes. Same with our situation. We're born with nothing that we asked for, and it's a problem, but there's no blame for being born that way. There's no blame for growing up that way. There's no blame for behaving in harmony with that way when that's all the option you've got at the moment, right? I know I'm not telling the whole picture at the moment, so don't stone me yet. But, I know, getting ready, right? So there's no blame for it, but is it a problem? Yes, and does it need to be fixed? Yes, absolutely. So there's a solution, there's a plan to fix the problem. It's called the plan of salvation, but there's no blame for being how we are. That causes the problem, right? So there's no blame, right? So I'm not going to come down with the hammer. It's not blame. Nobody ever creates disease on purpose. Like, it's like the whole population is going around, oh, I want diabetes, oh, I want hypertension, oh, I want this, oh, I want, yeah, let me have some autoimmune disease, oh, yeah, I want some real bad inflammation in my knees. Yes, I'm looking for pain and suffering and other things of that nature. Really? No. It's unconscious. Right? It's unconscious. There's no blame for it, but it's there. Now, what's that? Okay, good. It's not supper tomorrow. So yes, that's a cell. You and I have about, 50 to 100 trillion of those in your adult body. And there's about 200-ish different types of cells. And each cell has a particular type of product. It's like a factory, and it produces things. And what your body can do and the functions that the body has is dependent upon what each of the cells can do and the functions that the cells have. And if you lose a particular type of cell, you lose in your body any of the function that is specific to that type of cell. And one of the ones that we commonly think of would be type 1 diabetes. So in type 1 diabetes, what happens? Okay, so you can't produce insulin. Why? Because the insulin-producing cells don't exist anymore. Because certain white blood cells have gone around and killed, and antibodies involved with this as well. But anyway, so you have an immune response, an autoimmune response, and it kills off all the beta islet cells in the pancreas, and those are the only cells in the body that produce insulin, right? So now you can't produce insulin. Do you need insulin? Well, yeah. So if you can't produce what you need, how are you going to live? You got to get it somewhere. And praise God, somebody figured out how to extract it, and then somebody figured out how to manufacture it so that somebody who develops type 1 diabetes doesn't have to die in the next few hours after their diagnosis. Right? Praise God. Yeah, it used to be the worst diagnosis that you could get because you were going to be dead within hours to a few days, maybe a couple of weeks of your diagnosis. Gone. Right? Now, people can live into their 70s with, almost their whole life with type 1 diabetes. Well, praise God. But that body can't produce it if it doesn't have the cells to produce it. So you got to get it somewhere else. Now, a cause will immediately begin to produce an effect. But it may take time in order for that effect to be large enough to be noticed. So, like with type 1 diabetes, you might have the cause that's in place. Immediately, you start killing off cells. And if you kill them off at 100 cells per minute or per second, this is not realistic. I'm just using this as an illustration, right? Things don't happen like this biologically. But let's say that you started killing off your beta islet cells at 100 beta islet cells a second. Well, that would be 6,000 cells in a minute and 360,000 in an hour, and 8.6 million in a day, and 16.5 million in a week, and 260 million in a month, and 3.2 billion cells in a year. And let's say that you started off with 20 billion beta islet cells. How long is it going to take you to kill them off? Yeah, it's going to take about 6.5 years to knock them off. Now, it's generally believed that you have to lose about half of the cell population before you start manifesting symptoms. So it's going to take you about 3 years, 2 months of this process being there, running at that rate, before you actually notice it. So it could be in place and happening for a while before you actually have symptoms that are big enough for you to notice that there's a problem, right? But immediately when the cause was in place, the effect began, right? It just might not be big enough for you to notice it. And some disease processes are faster, other ones are slower. Some of them, it might be seconds, minutes, or hours between the cause and then the effect manifesting, and others, it might be years or even decades. Type 2 diabetes, probably we're talking 10 years or so in the process, a good decade in the process before you get to a point where you're symptomatic with your diabetes, right? But if you want to know what the cause is, then it must meet this criteria. The cause must be in place before the effect is noticed, so it has to be there before your first symptom. If the effect is still present and the effect is a process, a continuing process, then that means the cause must also still be present. Because if you take the cause and you remove it, what has to happen to the effect? It goes away. Right? It might be a process in going away, but it has to begin going away when it's removed. Right? So if you're looking for the cause, then it must be in your life before the first symptom. It must still be in your life now if the process is continuing. So that's what you're looking for. Right? So if you were 21 when you had your first of Z, whatever it was, and you're in your 50s and you still have it, well, it had to be something that was in your life by the time you were 21, and it has to be something that's in your life still. So that's what you're looking for when you're looking for the cause. And when I talk to somebody about their disease, I always want to know, when did it begin? When did it begin? Because that gives me at least the latest starting point. But it could be a long while before that, right? Because things can be in place for quite a while before you actually have the first manifestation. Right? So that's important. Remember that one. Now, how many cells need resources and power? Yeah, all of them do. Right? And like any living system, it must have two things. It must have fuel, and it must have something to ignite the fuel, to get it going, right? To get the system going. And so, according to the law, the cell must take. But does the cell take to keep? No, it takes to give. So it's going to take in those resources, it's going to take in that power, and it's going to give something. It's going to produce products along the way. So yes, it's kind of like a factory, but a factory's got to have raw materials. Now, what is the fuel for the cells? Okay. It's going to be your oxygen, your water, and your glucose, and your other nutrients, and so on. It's chemicals. Chemicals are the fuel for the cells. Got to have chemicals. If you don't provide the chemicals, the cells are not going to continue to function. They got to have it. And the chemicals are brought into the body through a particular system. Right? So oxygen's going to come in through your respiratory tract. Water, nutrients are going to come in through your digestive tract. Sunlight, vitamin D is going to be through the skin, and so on. Right? Now, how are you going to get the oxygen to every part of your body? Through the blood. That's right. So the blood is your transport mechanism. It's your train car. It's your semi-payload, right? It's the thing that gets it to every different part of the body. And we're told for the life of the flesh is in the blood. So is it important to have good circulation? Well, yes, absolutely. And if the circulation is hindered, then you can't get the fuel to the places that you need to. And if that's an artery in the heart, then it ends up being a heart attack. If that's an artery in the brain, then you can end up having a brain attack, and then you can have a kidney attack, and then you can have a intestinal attack, and you can have yeah, Big Mac attack, and right, and a back attack, and yes, and a Burger King attack, and yes. Anyways, now your cells can take what they need when you have a good concentration of what they need in their environment. If there's too little, that's going to be a problem. And if there's too much, that's going to be a problem as well. Right? So that's the chemicals, but the cells don't just need the chemicals or the fuel, the cell needs the spark. So where does the spark come from? Yeah, no, that's part of the chemicals. What's that? Thinking. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, mitochondria is made of chemicals, and it uses chemicals. All right. All right, the nerves. All right. Now, so the cells function as electrochemical units. So you got to have the chemicals, but you also have to have the electricity. And you can measure the voltage difference between the inside and the outside of the cell. There's resistance across the membrane, and you can measure that in microohms. And so there's microvolts, there's microohms, there is, so it's all electrical language because the cells function as electrical units. And if they lose that electrical component, nothing. You can have all the chemicals there, nothing. It's got to have the electricity. Where does the electricity come from? The spark, in order to get that, you already mentioned, but I'm going to back up the system a little bit. Comes from the brain, right? So you have the electrical activity of the brain that's going to be transmitted to the different parts of the body through the nerves. That's going to release chemicals that the cells themselves take in, because they must take, and now they use it, and then they give from there. But where is the brain getting the spark from? I'm just scratching my head. Okay. So, energy necessary for a system to function must come from outside that system. So the power for the brain must come from outside of the brain, right? But it's not the fuel. We're not looking at the fuel. We're looking at the spark. Where does the spark come from? And I will appeal to you that it comes through the pathway of spiritual information. Because you and I are not just physical, we're spiritual. And that spiritual information needs to be taken in by an organ or something that can bring that in, right? And what is going to take in spiritual information? Your mind. Your mind. But your mind is not just your brain, right? How many thoughts can an atom have? How many thoughts can a couple of atoms put together have? Can you put enough atoms together in enough arrangements and so on so that they can actually have a thought? No. I mean, if you believe evolutionary theory, then yes. Yeah, you're right, right. So the mind is not just the brain, right? It's the brain, yes, but there's something else too, right? So the mind is the brain and the spirit, right? Genesis 2 and verse 7. The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a soul, living soul, or living being, right? And the dust, which is very simple, became a very complex body. And the breath, which is simple, became a very complex spirit. And the combination of the two is the soul, which is you and me. We don't have a soul, we are a soul. Right? And the soul is made up of two parts. It's made up of spirit and it's made up of body. Right? And like a computer that has software and hardware, can you have any function without the hardware? No. Can you have any function without the software? No. You got to have both in order to have function. Similarly, you cannot have function without spirit and body. But if you bring software and hardware together, does the software stop being software? And does the hardware stop being? No. And do each of them have their own components of the overall function? Yes. So similarly, when spirit and body come together to make a soul or an individual, the spirit doesn't stop being the spirit, the body doesn't stop being the body, and each of them have individual components of the overall function, but there's no function unless they're together. Right? Together. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created a male and female, he created them. And so God is the source of information. And his information, again, information never originates in something that is physical. Information always originates in something that's spiritual. Right? But it can be put into something that's physical, it can be stored in something that's physical, it can be transmitted by something that's physical, but it never originates in something that's physical. And God is the source of information, and the information that comes from God is spiritual information. And we're told, Jesus said, the Father is, God is Spirit. Right? And he also said, the words that I speak to you, they are Spirit, and they are life. And he who said, the words that I speak to you are spirit and life, he is the Word who is made flesh and dwelt among us, and the Word was the one who spoke in the beginning and said, let there be light, and there was light. And he said, let there be a firmament, and there was a firmament. And he said, let there be dry land, and there was dry land. And he said, let there be a sun, moon, and stars, and there was sun, moon, and stars. So everything physical came from spiritual. Right. Everything physical came from spiritual. God is spirit. His word is spirit. He spoke and it became. And we were created in whose image? In God's image. So what goes first? The body or the spirit? The spirit. And then it affects the body and controls the body. And so it's the mind that controls the body and what happens in the body. And it does so by taking in the spiritual information, which is power. The Word of God is with power. It is power. So when we take in that spiritual information, it is a power. And that power empowers the spirit. And any power is taken, when it's taken and put into a different form or a different medium, it changes its form, but it doesn't change the fact that it's power. And so when that is given to the cortex, gets an electrical impulse, right? Generates an electrical impulse that now is in a chemical environment, and that is an electrochemical process that now helps to guide and control and the rest of the functions of the body, right? Through the nerves and the nervous system and through that pathway. And so it's the mind that can think, not the brain. But you must have the brain to be able to think. And it's the mind that can think, not the spirit. But you have to have the spirit in order to be able to think. It's the combination, right? And God, he created us in his image, and what kind of information does he produce? Spiritual information, and he produces truth. Produces truth, right? So he puts the information in the right. What kind of information information does the mind need in order to function properly? Truth. That's right. So the spiritual information that you and I need is truth, and God always speaks the truth in love. Always speaks the truth in love. So along with the truth comes love, which we need as well, and that is the power that's taken in by the Spirit, which through the nervous system controls the functions of the body and how they operate, and you get proper function. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's in the PowerPoint. And then there's also a book out there called The Law of Life. That covers this too. Now, what happens if the mind is in a confused state, and instead of taking the truth, it takes lies or error? Right. So is the mind going to be able to function properly under the influence of error? No. So that improper function is going to be communicated through the same pathway to the different parts of the body, and you can end up with disease and dysfunction, right? That happens in the body from that pathway. I'm not saying it's the only pathway, right? I'm not saying it's the only pathway. And we'll cover a few more in just a few minutes. But this is a major pathway. Medical school. I wasn't taught this in medical school. I didn't learn these things there, I had to, think about it and, and so on, and, how can things work and whatever, and, yes. So there are several different ways that you can get dysfunction in the body, right? And one of those ways is by inheritance, right? You can have a dysfunction from inheritance. And of course we know that inheritance is related to genetic material, which is incredibly dense information in a physical package, right? But it had to come from where? From a spirit, from spiritual, from God, right? So that information came from him originally with Adam, right? And then of course Eve came from Adam, and everybody else came from Adam. So everybody is a multiplication of Adam. We're all multiplications of Adam. We get that information when we're how many cells? One cell. And from that one cell comes how many of the cells? All of the cells. So if it's an inheritance issue, the defect came in the prior generation, and the blueprint has a defect problem, has a problem in the blueprint that came from a prior generation, and it came when you were a single cell, and from that single cell, all of the cells arise. So where are you going to find the problem? Every cell of the body, right? That's where the broken blueprint is going to be, but not every, all right, I said that already. Right, yeah, and from all over the cells arise. Okay, so all of the cells are going to contain the defective gene, but only certain cells of the gene, right? So your plumber is not going to use the electrical diagrams, and your electrician is not going to use the plumbing diagrams, and and if you're building the kitchen, you're not going to be using the part of the blueprint for the garage, and so on and so forth, right? So certain cells will use certain parts of the blueprint, and if it's a different type of cell, then it uses different parts of the blueprint that other cells don't. That's the only way to be a different type of cell, right? But every cell of the same type will manifest the problem, if it manifests the problem, right? So you're not going to find the problem in one red blood cell here and another red blood cell there and another red blood cell there. If it's an inheritance issue, you're going to find it through how many of the red blood cells? All of them. But you might not see it in a white blood cell, and you might not see it in a neuron or a nephron or and whatever, but you'll see it through all of the red blood cells, not part of them, right? If it's truly inheritance, right? So the defect will not be localized inside of a particular cell type. It will be everywhere that particular cell type is. And inheritance, when you have a defect, it doesn't create an advantage, unlike what we're told in evolution. Right? It impedes or it disrupts normal function. It doesn't create new functions. So if you have colon cancer that develops in a section of the colon, is that inheritance? No, unless in that section you have certain cells that you don't have elsewhere, and it began in all of the cells of that particular type. Then it could be inheritance. Right? Otherwise, if it in a particular part of an organ or a system, that has other cells of the same type, and it begins in one part and then it starts growing from there, that's not inheritance. There's something else going on, right? And if you have arthritis in a few joints, but you don't have arthritis in every joint, then that's not inheritance either, right? Now, I'm not saying it's not genetic, because everything is genetic. If it's not in the blueprint, it's not going to show up in a cell. It's not going to show up in a cell product, and so on. You got to have the code for it first. Not saying it's not genetic. I'm just saying it's not inheritance. Right? Environment is another cause, because your cells must be existing in a certain temperature and pressure and so on and so forth. And if you overdo that or underdo that, well, it's problematic. Right? So you take the hammer to the wrong nail, you're going to complain because the pressure just got too much, right? And that can be localized. You can smash one finger and the other fingers are okay. And if damage is beyond the capacity to heal, then the effect can be permanent. Like if you took the machete to your arm rather than to the tree over there, and you cut the arm off, and you were in the jungle, and so you didn't have the opportunity of having the hand surgeon to be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, but you had enough to be able to tourniquet and not bleed to death, and so on and so forth. Well, you might end up with enough, and you're not growing a new. But so the effect can be permanent. But what should not happen is that you continue to have permanent pain associated with that trauma. If you have permanent pain associated with that trauma, there's something else going on. Right? Something else. So smaller injuries that remain permanently are permanent, usually reflect a dysfunction in the healing process. And so that's not necessarily an environmental cause. There's something else going on with the healing system. And trauma only disrupts existing structure and function. It doesn't create new functions. Right? Now, a third cause, which we blame often, is chemicals. Right? Anybody know that chemicals are associated with disease? Oh, yeah, sure. So there's certain things that you need, and if you've got too little of it, there's going to be dysfunction. If you have too much of it, well, we call that a toxicity. Right? That's not going to be so good. And if you have the wrong stuff, like poisons and envenomations and so on, that's not going to be working so good either. So poisons, envenomations, toxicities, deficiencies, what these do is they disrupt or they stop existing processes in the body and then lead to dysfunction. They don't actually create a new process. They come in and interrupt an existing process that's there. Right? And so let's look at some things that we think are related to chemicals. What's this? Gout. Gouty arthritis. What chemical is associated with gout? Uric acid, that's right. So if I want to know whether that's gout in your left great toe, I can go to the lab, and of course I need to instruct them to suck the blood out of your left foot, right? No? You never had the lab technician take blood out of your left foot? I had to do that in the ICU because sometimes that was the only vein that I could find. But, anyways, it's another story. But, so, where do you get the blood from? Anywhere. Do I have to specify that it's the left arm or the right arm or the left hand, the right hand, the top part of the body, the bottom part of the body? No, it doesn't matter. I can get it from anywhere, and I can find out where whether your uric acid levels are high or not. And if your uric acid levels are high and you've got this going on, then I go, okay, well, you got gout, and now I need to give you some anti-inflammatory medication and maybe some allopurinol or something like that in order to reduce your uric acid levels so that when your uric acid levels get low enough, then the gout goes away, and great, right? Okay. We solved the problem, right? You skeptics. Skeptics, I tell you. All right, so you got this plaque. What's that? What the doctors don't know. Oh, yeah. All right, so you got this plaque developing in an artery in your heart, right? And it's filled with what? Okay, so it's got some calcium if it's a hard plaque. Well, it will have some calcium with it anyways, but the amount of calcium will determine whether it's a hard plaque or whether it's a soft plaque and so on. And this is filled with what? Yeah, fat, you know, typically in the form of cholesterol, right? and the culprit typically is LDL cholesterol or a dense LDL cholesterol, specifically oxidized cholesterol and so on, that's involved in this process, right? Now, if you have that, what's the solution? All right, so decrease your consumption of cholesterol, take cholesterol-lowering medications, other things of that nature so that you can get the cholesterol levels low enough so you can get this thing to turn around. Now, mind you, there are a couple of studies that show significant reversal of plaque. And they involve plant-based diets, exercise, and stress management. And some of it involves cholesterol-lowering medications. Right? But when it comes to trials of cholesterol-lowering medications alone, well, there was one study that came out that showed a 1% reduction in plaque. And I don't know how you can effectively assess 1% with an ultrasound. And anyways, that was a little suspect. But some of these can be reversed, right? So you fix the problem. Woo! All right, here you have an individual. We'll call this male left-sided breast cancer, right? And so this is a guy that has breast cancer on the left side. Yes, men do get breast cancer about 100 times less often than women do, but it happens. And so on. And so maybe they were eating hot dogs and bratwurst and salami and other processed red meats, and that those processed red meats are class 1A carcinogens and so on. And so maybe this is the lifestyle that they grew up with, and so they had all of these exposures. And so when they develop their breast cancer, what do you advise them to do? Oh, you change your diet. Stop eating that stuff. And is that appropriate? Yes. Have you fixed the problem? Skeptics. All right. So what's this a picture illustrating? Diffusion. Diffusion. So if you have a liquid environment and you have other liquid things that can go in that liquid environment, they tend to spread out over time into an even concentration. So anytime you take anything into your system that is chemical and it can be dissolved, it's going to be absorbed through the skin, your respiratory tract, your digestive tract, and then it will get into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream will mix it all up. And your bloodstream's pretty hot, and the hotter you make it, the faster it goes. The more you stir it, the quicker it distributes, and so on. So now, choose where in your body I get the blood from. I just need to get your blood. Because it's the same concentration of uric acid that's going to the left foot as is going to the right foot. But the problem's in the left foot and not in the right foot. So how's that? Chance, which means the effect without a cause. Yes? Yes? Ever heard your doctor tell you, oh, it's just dumb luck? How would you like to... Oh, yes. Dumb luck, yeah. Just dumb luck. Do you like it when your healthcare provider believes in chance and dumb luck? Yeah, acts of God, yeah. Insurance companies believe in that. Yeah. They don't believe in him, but they'll blame him on the bad stuff that happens. Okay. So how much cholesterol was in your blood vessel here versus there? The same. But you got the problem right here. Why is it right here? Oh, okay. All right. So there's damage that happened here, and because of the damage, you have an inflammatory process, and in the inflammatory process, you have the immune cells that come over here, and they take care of the problem, and so on and so forth. Have you ever cut yourself? How long did you bleed for? Did you cut yourself like 10 years ago, and you're still bleeding now? No, why not? Because the body heals. How long does it take the body to heal an injury in a blood vessel? Pretty quick. It's important for it to be healed pretty quick. But we're told this is the result of injury that goes on for decades, or years at least. And it didn't heal over years or decades? Hello? Let's think. All right. If that's the case, why is it not healing? And why is it not healing there? If it was a natural process of deposition, it should look like this. That is a natural deposition of a chemical in super concentration in a pipe fluid flowing situation, right? That's a natural process. That is not a natural process. There's something else going on. What is going on? If you go walking down the beach and you see that, and your cruise liner has just sunk, and you're the only one that made it to the beach, and you're walking along, and this is a small island, and you see that, what do you conclude? You're not the only one there, unless you just finished doing that, and you're like, oh, this is wonderful. You're not the only one there, right? Now, can you make a sandcastle without sand? No, so you got to have the sand to make the sandcastle, but does the sand make the sandcastle? No. You got to have something that uses the sand to make the sandcastle with. So why do you find the sandcastle here? When what you ate went everywhere. Oh yeah, you ate the animal proteins, but the animal proteins went just as much to the right chest as it went to the left chest. But you ended up with the cancer in the left side. Why there? Why'd you go walking down the beach and you found the sandcastle here? Is it because the sand was only there? No. No. So you got to account for why did it happen here? Yeah, there's something unique about that location. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, what can be unique in that location? What can cause something unique in a localized location? Okay, clotting in the microcirculation, okay, but still, then we have to ask the question, why is it doing that? And why is it doing it there? All right, yeah, but it's inside the heart is even closer to the heart, right? So it's not a proximity issue. All right, so chemicals can cause dysfunction first. If you are deficient in iodine, what's it going to affect first? Your thyroid, because your thyroid uses iodine the fastest. But what part of your thyroid is it going to affect? All of it, right? The same type of cells have the same need, and they're going to be defective, dysfunctional, if they don't have enough that's there, right? If you run out of oxygen, what's going to die first? Your brain cells, your neurons, because they use oxygen fast, and they're going to. So yes, you'll have manifestations that show up in a particular cell type first, but it should be relatively, not perfectly, but relatively even throughout that particular cell type. And not like a there and so on and so forth. So chemicals can be used as a part of a disease process as a cofactor. You got to have sand to build the sandcastle. And what happens if you remove the sand? Oh, the castle goes away. Right? And when you remove the cofactor or the chemical, the disease process doesn't manifest. So you take care of the cholesterol. Oh, well, that goes away. You take care of the uric acid. Oh, that goes away. Oh, you take care of the animal protein or whatever. Well, that can go away. It's like pouring water on the sandcastle. Now you don't have a sandcastle anymore. But did you do anything about the sandcastle builder? He can come back later and build another sandcastle. And guess what? He does. He does. So the chemical is not the cause because a chemical can't create a process. A chemical can only be used as a part of a process. So what's going on? Well, you've got two options. One, physical trauma, because physical trauma can be localized. You can smash one finger, all of the other fingers are okay. But number two, it can be the mind. It can be the mind. Because the mind is very remarkable. Very remarkable. You have a spot in your brain that is connected to a spot in your body that it receives information from, and you have a spot in your brain that has a spot in the body that it sends information to, and you have this receiving and sending and receiving and sending, and it's very specific. In your brain, everybody controls, that's the motor cortex. All right, everybody controls their toes from the upper inner portion of the brain. Right? And everybody controls their lips with the outer portion of the brain. Right? It's just organized and regulated that way. That's the way God created it to be. And yes, it's set up in such a way that your right brain controls your left body and your left brain controls your right body, but then the same side of the head. Right? So guess what you have? Oh, a nerve. And that nerve, since it's going to the left toe, is coming from the right upper inner cortex. And there can be a signal that's sent from the right upper inner cortex that ends up in that joint. And by the way, can chemicals concentrate themselves? That's like sand making a sandcastle. Can sand make a sandcastle? No. Can chemicals concentrate themselves? No. They can be concentrated. But in order to do so, you have to have something that can move them against their concentration gradient. And what can move chemicals against their concentration gradient? Some input of power. And I would propose to you, it must be in the body, it must be a living cell. Because a living cell across its membrane can move chemicals against their concentration gradient. So the accumulation of uric acid in that joint is an active process of cells concentrating uric acid in that joint, and then it becoming super concentrated, and then it crystallizes, and now you have the manifestation of the gout, when it's not in another joint that's at a similar distance, or the joint that's even farther distance, and so on and so forth in that process. Right? And where do cells get their instructions from? From the brain, from the mind. Right? And what do you have in this part of the artery that you don't have in the other parts of the artery? A nerve ending that comes from a particular place in the brain. You can have a signal that's sent from that nerve ending and from that part of the brain that goes to that part of the artery and sends a signal there. And now it's communicating, it's sending signals to the living cells in the area. Now the living cells can concentrate and can leave things here and so on and so forth. And you have a process that can go on for years and decades. And what goes to the tumor? The nerve. Guess what happens when you cut a nerve that goes to the center of a tumor? It changes how it behaves. It's interesting. Now there's research on that. You cut the nerve that's going to a tumor, it changes how it behaves. And in fact, there's research that shows that in cancer, everything from initiation all the way till, metastasis and setting up in another location, it's all affected by the nervous system. All affected by the nervous system. So the mind can control processes, increase them, decrease them. It can regulate all regulation mechanisms in the body, like your heart rate and blood pressure and fluid volume and electrolyte levels and pH balance. It's all controlled by the mind, and its effects can be generalized or very localized. You can have the fight or flight response, and it affects every bit of the physiology of your body, or you can have one toe, right? And it controls the immune system and its function, and so the mind is the primary controller of inflammation, not the only one, but the primary. And it's the primary controller of cell, tissue, organ, and organ system function. And 90% of the time, if you find disease in the body, go looking for the mind. Go looking for the cause in the mind, right? And mind you, if you go look where the problem is, you're not going to find the cause. If you go looking where the problem is, you're not going to find the cause. Because the effect had to come from, the cause for the effect had to be where? Outside of the effect, right? Because the energy necessary for it to function and the resources had to come from outside of it. So you will never find the cause where you find the effect. The cause is always outside of where the effect is. So if you find the effect in the pancreas, don't go looking in the pancreas for the cause. You got to look outside of there. And the final cause for dysfunction, and we'll close, is the enemy. The enemy. So you had Job, and Job had boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. It wasn't because Job had an inheritance issue that just manifested when he was that age. It wasn't because he had environmental issues and happened to, be under too much or too little pressure environmentally or whatever. It wasn't because he had the wrong chemicals in his environment. It wasn't because his mind was messed up. He was righteous. God called him righteous, and God knows what he's talking about. It was the enemy that was allowed to attack him. And I tell you, if he was in my day and age, I would culture him. I'd cut one of those suckers open that he hadn't gotten to already, because he cut himself with pot shards and covered himself with ashes. Guess what? That's IND, incision and drainage, and charcoal. So he was treating it. He was treating it, right? But I would do the same thing. I'd find some pus pocket that he hadn't gotten to, and I would cut that thing open, and I would culture it and find out what bacteria is there, and then I'd put them on antibiotics and broad-spectrum antibiotics at the beginning, and then send it in for culture and sensitivity and find out what specifically it is and what it's sensitive to, and then we'd switch it to whatever antibiotics he's sensitive to. But guess what? I don't think it would touch it. Because it's not the bacteria that's the cause. The bacteria were part of the process, yes, just like sand is needed for the sandcastle, but it's not the cause. And it was a great controversy issue. And until that great controversy issue was resolved, that infection was not going away. So when you have dysfunction that's going on, you got to look. Is it inheritance? Okay. Well, it must be throughout every cell of the same type. Is it environment? Okay. Well, then there was trauma. Some kind of physical trauma that was there. And you should remember, typically. Was it chemicals? Well, again, it can start in a certain cell type first, but it should be even throughout that cell type. But a chemical cannot create a new process. It can only be used as a part of the process. And if you find the thing localized, start looking here to the mind. Yes, there's the issue of the enemy, but I'll tell you, I've done a lot of counseling, and from the health side and from the counseling side of things. And he usually gets us where? Right there in the mind. Right. All right, so that's what doctors don't know about disease. All right. So I don't remember what tomorrow's topic is, but it's going to be what somebody else doesn't know about something, and we're going to figure it out tomorrow. What's that? Oh, what the psychiatrist doesn't know about your mind. Okay, yeah, it's great. Well, let's pray, and then I'm going to let you run away. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. Oh, this is a lot for us to think about, Lord, and some of us might be up late tonight thinking about it. Grant us your rest, and Lord, help us to assimilate. Help us to understand what we need to understand so that we can look in the right place for the cause. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. See you tomorrow.